Look closely at these images. The roar of 56,000 people in Melbourne, Australia, suddenly replaced by a silence so heavy you could feel it through the screen. This wasn't just a knockout. This wasn't just a title changing hands. This was the moment a religion died. In the video today, we are deconstructing the most significant upset in the history of combat sports. The delusional downfall of Ronda Rousey. We're going beyond the head kick. We're looking at how a woman who thought she was a god was brought back to earth by a preacher's daughter who knew better. This is the night Holly Holm shocked the world. Before November 14, 2015, Ronda Rousey wasn't just a fighter. She was an inevitability. She was on the cover of Ring magazine. She was in Entourage. She was the baddest woman on the planet. But success is a slow-acting poison. Today we dive into the complete story, from the tragic suicide of her father to the golden cages of Las Vegas, and finally to that violent, high-definition crash in Melbourne that no one, not even the UFC, saw coming. Why did it happen? Was it her ego? Was it the yes men in her corner? Or was it simply the inevitable evolution of a sport that Ronda helped build but eventually outgrew her? To understand why Ronda Rousey fell, you first have to understand why she was so desperate to climb. Ronda didn't just fight opponents in the octagon. She was fighting the ghosts of her past. When Ronda was only 8 years old, her father, Ron Rousey, took his own life. It was a trauma that would define her entire existence. She didn't just want to win, she needed to win to justify the pain she carried. Every time she stepped onto a mat or into a cage, she was trying to fill a hole that success could never truly patch. Her mother, Anne Maria de Mars, herself a world-class judoka and the first American to win a World Judo Championship, didn't offer a shoulder to cry on. She offered a blueprint for dominance. No one is ever allowed to beat you, was the mantra. In the Rousey household, second place was a failure of character. Anne Maria famously woke Ronda up with arm bars, training her to be defensive even in her sleep. This created a fighter with a relentless, terrifying drive, but it also created a person who viewed defeat as a loss of identity. By the time she reached the Olympics in 2008, Ronda was a human wrecking ball, securing a bronze medal in judo. But the Olympics didn't pay the bills. She spent years living out of her car, working as a bartender, and feeling the world had forgotten her. This period of struggle became her fuel. When she finally found MMA, she didn't just enter the sport, she conquered it. She was the pioneer. She forced Dana White, a man who famously said women would never fight in the UFC, to build an entire division around her. She was the lightning rod for a new era. But here's the thing about building a house on trauma. If you don't heal the foundation, the higher you build, the more dangerous the collapse becomes. Ronda's identity was 100% tied to being the best. She didn't have a life outside of being undefeated. And as we would soon find out, when you have everything to lose, you start fighting with a different kind of energy. Not the energy of a hunter, but the energy of someone terrified of being exposed. She was no longer fighting for the joy of the sport. She was fighting to keep the mask from slipping. While Ronda was becoming a global icon, appearing on Jimmy Fallon and filming movies in Hollywood, a very different kind of storm was brewing in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Holly Holm was the polar opposite of the Rousey hype machine. Known as the preacher's daughter, Holly was raised with a quiet, disciplined intensity. She wasn't a personality, she was a professional. Before she ever stepped foot in a cage, Holly Holm was already a legend in the world of boxing. She was a multiple-time world champion across 3 different weight classes. She had been in the deep waters. She had been hit, she had been cut, and she had won championships in front of small crowds in gymnasiums. Holly didn't need the cameras to feel valid. She had the backing of Greg Jackson and Mike Winkeljohn, two of the most brilliant tactical minds in MMA history. While Ronda was being told she was a god by her coaches, Holly was being given a cold, calculated game plan. The world looked at Holly as a plus 800 underdog, a sacrificial lamb brought in to give Ronda another highlight reel finish. But Holly knew something the world didn't. Ronda Rousey wasn't a striker. She was a grappler who had been convinced she was a striker. And in the world of high-level combat, that kind of delusion is a death sentence. Success is the ultimate enemy of growth. By 2015, the Ronda Rousey show was at its absolute peak. She was finishing world-class opponents in 14 seconds, 16 seconds, 34 seconds. It looked like magic. But behind the scenes, a dangerous yes-man culture had taken hold. Enter Edmond Tavadian. To many analysts, Edmond is the man who broke Ronda Rousey. He convinced her that she wasn't just a great judoka, but that she was a world-class boxer. He famously told her she could outbox anyone. This was the peak of the delusion. Ronda started believing her own hype. She was on the cover of Ring magazine, the Bible of boxing, despite never having a professional boxing match. She was filming Mile 22 and Expendables 3. She was no longer a fighter who happened to be a celebrity. She was a celebrity who occasionally fought. The cracks started showing at the weigh-ins for UFC 193. Usually Ronda was the one in control, but in Melbourne she was erratic. She lunged at Holly during the face-off, screaming that Holly was a fake-ass, cheap-shotting bitch. It was a projection. Ronda was the one feeling the pressure. She was the one who needed the preacher's daughter to be a villain because she couldn't handle the reality that Holly was just better prepared. The most damning moment of the entire saga happened between the first and second rounds. Ronda had just been dismantled for 5 minutes. She was bleeding, she was gasping for air, and she looked completely lost. And what did Edmond Tavadian say to her? "Champ, beautiful work, you're doing great." It was a lie. It was a delusional, systemic failure of coaching. He wasn't giving her adjustments. He was protecting her ego. And in that moment, the fight was already over. Let's talk about the data. Let's talk about why this was a technical execution, not just a lucky punch. The sport of MMA had evolved, but Ronda Rousey had stayed still. She was still trying to use brute force and a bull rush style that worked against lower level strikers. But Holly Holm was a matador, and she had spent months in the high altitude gyms of Albuquerque preparing for this exact bull. Holly used 3 specific tools to dismantle the queen. 1. Lateral movement and footwork. Ronda always moved in a straight line. She was a pressure fighter who relied on cornering her opponents. But Holly moved in circles. She used what her coaches called the Albuquerque shuffle. Every time Ronda tried to clinch, Holly was already gone. Ronda was literally punching air, wasting energy and getting frustrated. In the first round alone, Ronda's strike accuracy dropped to a career low. She was swinging at shadows. 2. The oblique kick. This is a controversial but highly effective tool. Holly used her lead leg to stomp on Ronda's thigh and knee. This didn't just cause pain, it disrupted Ronda's rhythm. It kept her at a distance where she couldn't use her judo. Every time Ronda tried to step in for a hip toss, she was met with a foot to the thigh that reset the distance. It was a technical masterclass in distance management. 3. The straight left, because Ronda kept her chin high and her hands low, a result of poor boxing fundamentals and a coach who told her she was a beautiful striker. Holly was able to land the straight left at will. By the end of the first round, Ronda's nose was broken, her lip was split, and her spirit was flagging. She was bleeding for the first time in her career, and she didn't know how to handle it. Then came the second round, the moment that changed everything. Ronda, desperate and exhausted, lunged forward with a wild hook. Holly ducked with the grace of a professional boxer, moved to the side, and Ronda literally stumbled into the fence. She looked like a beginner. As Ronda turned around, dazed and looking for her opponent, she found Holly's shin waiting for her. The head kick was perfect. It wasn't just power, it was timing. It was the culmination of years of boxing and kickboxing mastery, meeting a total lack of defensive awareness. When Ronda hit the canvas, the UFC's marketing machine hit the canvas with her. The unbeatable era was over in a flash of leather and bone. The crowd of 56,000 went from a roar to a collective gasp, and then to a silence that felt like a funeral. The Queen was dead. Here, the aftermath of UFC 193 was more than just a loss, it was a psychological collapse. Ronda Rousey didn't just lose a belt, she lost her identity. The woman who once bragged about being the most dangerous woman on the planet was now hiding her face with a purple pillow at the airport, shielded by her boyfriend Travis Brown. She disappeared from the public eye for months, retreating into a deep depression. When she finally spoke to Ellen DeGeneres in early 2016, she admitted to having suicidal thoughts in the medical room after the fight. "I was literally sitting in the corner and thinking about killing myself," she said, her voice trembling. "What am I if I'm not this?" This is the tragedy of the fallen fighter. When your entire self-worth is built on a record, a single one in the lost column can feel like a death sentence. The trauma of her father's suicide, which she had used as fuel for so long, had finally caught up with her. She realised that without the zero on her record, she didn't know who Ronda Rousey was. Ronda tried to come back against Amanda Nunes at UFC 207 a year later, but the damage was done. The invincibility was gone, and more importantly, the fear she used to instill in her opponents had vanished. Amanda Nunes didn't see a god, she saw a target. Ronda was knocked out in 48 seconds, standing up without ever landing a meaningful punch. It was the final nail in the coffin. She never fought again. She moved to the WWE, a world of scripted outcomes and choreographed moves where she could be a winner without the risk of a real-world reality check. Holly Holm, on the other hand, became the giant slayer. While she struggled to defend the belt in her subsequent fights, her legacy was already cemented. She was the one who showed the world that no one is untouchable. She was the one who proved that discipline, humility, and world-class technique will always, eventually, overcome hype and ego. She stayed in the sport, winning and losing with the same grace she showed on that night in Melbourne. She didn't need to be a god. She was content being a fighter. So, what is the legacy of the night? Holly Holm shocked the world. Was Ronda Rousey ever as good as we thought she was? Or were we simply blinded by the marketing? The truth is somewhere in the middle. Ronda was a pioneer who changed the world for women in sports. But she was also a victim of her own success, a fighter who stopped being a student and started being a brand. Today, the fallen fighters like Ronda serve as a warning to the next generation. Success is a Trag-Haig gif, a slow poison. The moment you think you've reached the top is the moment you start falling. What do you think? Was it Edmond Tarverdyan's fault, or was Ronda's downfall inevitable? Let us know in the comments below. Was she a true GOAT, or just a product of the right time and the right place? Don't forget to subscribe to Fallen Fighters for more deep dive analyses into the rise and fall of the legends who defined the game. We'll see you in the next one.